A new morning and a new time for a camera comparison. The best of the best currently on the global market in terms of cameras. The Huawei P60 Pro versus the Xiaomi 13 Ultra. And here you can see the specs. We have a triple lens setup on the Huawei 48 megapixel main camera, 48 megapixel telezoom, 13 megapixel ultra wide angle, and we have a 4 times 50 megapixel behemoth beast on the Xiaomi 13 Ultra with the 1-inch main sensor, and of course the 3.2 times telezoom, as well as a 5 times telezoom and an ultra wide angle. And then of course we have the front facing cameras. We have 13 megapixels on the Huawei and 32 megapixels on the Xiaomi. And I think we start off with the front facing video. We start off with the Huawei P60 Pro and its front-facing camera. 4K, you can record here 4K up to 60 frames per second. I'm recording 4K 30 here right now, and you have the option to go to wide if you want to, which gives you a nice wide field of view, especially useful for vlogging. And then of course we have the one-time zoom, which gives you a very cropped in kind of image, which might be also very interesting for some people. And by default you have 0.8 times, which looks like this, and I think it's a good compromise, the perfect size, the perfect photo length for vlogging. What do you think about the Huawei P60 Pro's front-facing video? Now I'm here on the Xiaomi. Sadly no 4K recording on the front-facing camera, just 1080p, but they upgraded at least that you can record 60 frames per second, and I'm doing this right now because it is recording with a higher bitrate, which gives you, I think, a little bit of a crisper image there as well. So what do you think about the Xiaomi 13 Ultra here for super flagship? Is it even tolerable to not having 4K front recording? Is it good for vlogging even? I'm not so sure about it. Of course, 1080p for vlogs might be, can get away with this. Action cams sometimes only have like a little bit more than full HD, like 2.7K. I think the new Insta360 Go 3 came out with 2.7K only recording, which is nice and I think enough for vlogs maybe. But if you want to do a little bit more, then this front cam sadly disappoints a bit. What do you think? Now I'm recording with the Huawei P60 Pro's main camera lens, a very large sensor, 1/1.39 I think, or 1/1.4, and a variable aperture that combined gives you nice background blur, even in its default state where it's using only f2 to keep a better focus here on my face. I think it's fantastic still for a flagship, even though some others have a bit of a better kind of 1-inch type sensor. But this variable aperture really helps with this, and it's no slouch either. So what we want to do right now is perform a little zoom test, because I see a ship passing by. So let's do this quickly. So you can zoom in at roughly 3.4 times. It will switch lenses, and we can go up to 15 times. What do you think about this in comparison to the Xiaomi? This is now the Xiaomi's recording 15 times zoom, and I can go further out here, like 10 times, which still looks good. It's using and utilizing the 5 times zoom, so roughly at 5 times it switches to the 3.2 times zoom that we reached now, and now it switches to the 1-inch type sensor, and we are now at 1 time. So this is the 1-inch type sensor on the Xiaomi 13 Ultra, the main highlight of this device. What do you think about this one? It has also a variable aperture, but this one, in comparison to the one on the Huawei, can only switch between f1.9 and f4. Which looks like this. So this is now wide open. Do you see the difference here? Probably you will see the difference, and you can see also that it comes very close to the bokeh of the 1-inch type sensor, especially for video mode. In photo mode maybe not so much, but in video mode for sure, though it has some autofocusing issues and hunting that I noticed here on the P60 Pro, even more than on the Mate 50 Pro that also had some issues there with the video. This is why they probably by default are sticking to f2. But how does it look like with f1.6? So this is now with f1.6, still a wider aperture than on the Xiaomi, so we'll get also nice background blur, but probably the focusing issue might be fixed. And this is one of the good things here on the Huawei, that you have a true variable aperture, so you can switch between f1.4 up to f4. and all the intermediate steps, where on the Xiaomi only f1.9 and f4, so only 2 steps. So what do you think about this one here? The ultra wide angle. This is the Huawei P60 Pro's ultra wide angle. Of course, when I'm recording 4K 60, I can switch between all the lenses if I want to. Only 4K 60 frames per second, I can only switch between the main and the telezoom one and not use the ultra wide angle. So what do you think about the ultra wide angle? Perfect, I think, for vlogging. I would say good HDR, good stabilization, very good done by Huawei. And this is now the 0.5 magnification, so ultra wide angle on the Xiaomi 13 Ultra. Is it as ultra wide as on the Huawei P60 Pro? Write it down in the comment section. Otherwise, stabilization should be fine, HDR should be fine as well, and you can, I think, record up to 4K 60 frames per second on this lens as well. So what do you think about this one here in comparison to the Huawei? What we want to check out right now are some photo samples. And I have a sad news for you. Yeah, do you know that spot? Yes, this is the spot where I usually filmed Darth Vader, but sadly you can see he's gone. So no Darth Vader in this video and photo samples. Here, the photos on the left was the Xiaomi 13 Ultra, on the right was the P60 Pro. I'm using Leica Authentic on the Xiaomi, and I'm using the Xmage Original on the P60 Pro. And what you can see is much warmer kind of color tones on the Xiaomi 13 Ultra, a little bit of vignetting going on, a little bit maybe too warm, where the P60 Pro is a bit too cool, especially the sky color, which is much bluer there than it should be, but it's not so warm as the Xiaomi 13 Ultra makes it look like. Detail level is basically on par. You can see the photo length and the difference in sensor size making stuff in the background more sharp than in the foreground, where the P60 Pro is sharpening things up all over the place, which is yeah, a styling thing. Now, very interesting, when I switch to the Leica vivid mode, is what we can get is basically a much more vivid mode of what we see with the P60 Pro. So the same kind of color in the sky, maybe a little bit overdone because it's just a little bit too blue there, and overall it looks very, very similar, but just like a vivid version of this. The P60 Pro has also an Xmage vivid version, but be aware of this. Don't use it. It's like, you look what it's doing with the sky. It's like everything's blue there, and it's just simply not pleasant to look at. When we take a look at the ultra wide angle, by the way, again, Leica Authentic and Xmage Original, we can see that the Huawei is a bit more sharper, especially towards the center, but also towards the edges. I think that has something to do not only with a bit more aggressive sharpening applied, but also because the lens is a bit better there. But we have a wider lens on the Xiaomi 13 Ultra, 12mm versus the 13mm here on the P60 Pro. Then we have like Authentic mode, which sharpens a little bit up, and you can see the sky color maybe a little bit more also HDR than here on the P60 Pro. It's a bit more bluish and a bit more comparable to what we get with the P60 Pro. And when we come to zoom shots with the macro shots, actually not zoom shots on the P60 Pro, it's a zoom shot. On the Xiaomi 13 Ultra, it's a macro shot. Sadly, the Xiaomi ditched the 13 Pro's tele-macro camera, so we have to rely on the ultra-wide angle. This is what you can get with the ultra-wide angle. Not very pleasant. You can see already on first glance, the P60 Pro looks much more pleasant and has much more details. So yeah, macro photography definitely a win for the P60 Pro. How about zoom shots in general? 3.2 times versus 3.5 times. Very comparable in terms of detail level, and yeah, look at the pictures there. Yeah, a bit zoomed more in on the P60 Pro, but the rendering and so on and the detail levels are basically on par, which is quite nice. And 5 times zoom is like improving stuff, but it's also very, very good on the Xiaomi 13 Ultra. Let's compare it to 10 times zoom, and here we can see that it's still very, very good on the Xiaomi 13 Ultra. Let's go to 10 times on the Xiaomi 13 Ultra, but here you can see the Xiaomi 13 Ultra is winning against the P60 Pro in terms of zoom. We have less of those artifacts here and processing and more details a bit on the Xiaomi 13 Ultra, even though it's struggling sometimes as well with getting the details. Look at this down here, the people on the boat there, both struggling a bit, and you can argue that one is not really better than the other one there. Otherwise, when it comes to bokeh, very interesting. Here, interestingly enough, the P60 Pro, I went to Pro mode, set the f1.4 and then hit the flower and just take the shot, and everything's nice and sharp. Xiaomi 13 Ultra struggled to keep focus, even though it get me from the focus confirmation. in autofocus. So I went to Pro mode and did manual focus, which works nice. So set it to the lowest possible option for the main sensor, and here's what we get. What you can see here, the bokeh is pretty much comparable, but the P60 Pro's bokeh is a bit more busy, and you can see a little bit more of noise creeping in already here, which is quite interesting. So the larger aperture of the P60 Pro can keep up with the 1-inch sized sensor and slower aperture there on the Xiaomi 13 Pro. Though it is the focus fall off, you can see it's a bit different there, and I think overall more pleasant is the 1-inch sensor on the Xiaomi 13 Ultra. Selfie is very interesting because here no HDR at all when you have portrait mode enabled for the Xiaomi 13 Ultra, which is quite interesting. I did take multiple shots, so you have this overexposure of the sky. The P60 Pro keeps the shadows here, has nice detail level, and in everyday in form it's winning against the Xiaomi 13 Ultra's 32 megapixels, which is like one of the weakest. You get a bit of HDR when you are going into the normal mode without portrait, normal selfie mode, but sharpness level is simply, P60 Pro is like on a different level there. When it comes to portrait shots, the default portrait shots very comparable, though I think a bit of more towards the greenish side here on the background, more background blur for the 13 Ultra, a nice softness, it makes the face a little bit look softer. The P60 Pro makes everything a bit sharper by default, and I think more contrasty looking, which also adds to the perception of sharpness, and does something with the eyes here to make them look a little bit more popping out, which is quite interesting. So here I think I will lean towards the P60 Pro a bit, even though it's not so natural. Now let's take a look at the various different modes that we have here. So I think this is swirly bokeh on both. No, it's not swirly bokeh. It's like the normal blurry bokeh on both. You can still see it has a bit of softness. And here I like the P60 Pro's 3.5 times zoom shot a bit better than a 3.2 times on the Xiaomi 13 Ultra. It's just simply a bit more details there. If you want to crop in a little bit, that's the thing that you want to do with the P60 Pro. Otherwise, yeah, we have a swirly bokeh as well here, same in terms of sharpness and stage stuff and another stuff which is very comparable to this kind of shot. Anyway, we have also this shot with 2 times zoom on both, so both have to use and utilize their main sensors to crop in because they don't have a dedicated 2 times zoom. And here you can see a bit soft, not so contrasty, and here the P60 Pro looks a bit too artificial looking, too much processing going on, and the contrast added and so on. Yeah, might be looking a bit more detailed and sharp, but it's not pleasant. So here I would prefer the 13 Ultra. Let's go to low light shots. Very interesting that the Xiaomi 13 Ultra by default does no text optimization or sharpening up in low light, where the P60 Pro does this. We have this quite fast focus fall off here, where the P60 Pro keeps everything nice and sharp here, and you can read everything. So if you want to photograph text in low light situations here, the P60 Pro is definitely better when it comes to this kind of things. But when you come to ultra low light shots, I think the P60 Pro is losing a bit against the Xiaomi 13 Ultra in the default auto mode. As you can see, a bit of a bluish kind of tint, bluish and a bit greenish tint on the P60 Pro, where the Xiaomi 13 Ultra maybe a little bit magenta. Detail levels basically on par. I would argue the auto mode here on the Xiaomi 13 Ultra is even better than the night mode, but we will see it later. Look at the text here, much sharper, texture much more natural, not so bluish there, and here as well sharper on the 13 Ultra. But let's go to the dedicated night mode, and you can see it's getting a bit warmer, color is more corrected, still a bit too greenish on the P60 Pro, but the detail level is now there, very comparable to the Xiaomi one, and also the detail level here is very comparable, I would say. The Xiaomi also has a dedicated night mode, which looks like this, and when you compare now the dedicated night modes with each other, you can see that the sharpness on the P60 Pro is a bit better. The algorithms are working a bit better to stitch everything together, and here you can see also the difference in terms of detail levels there. Quite interesting. So I would take the colors of the Xiaomi 13 Ultra each day with the sharpness of the P60 Pro and the algorithm there. So overall, which one is the winner for you? Which one is the winner, the P60 Pro or the Xiaomi 13 Ultra? It's a very close fight. I like the 1-inch size sensor and the color profiles on the Xiaomi 13 Ultra very much. Leica Authentic is giving it a little bit of like this unique kind of look, even though the colors are not always realistic, sometimes a bit too desaturated or too warm looking. The P60 Pro also has a bit more too saturated colors sometimes, also not very realistic. But the Xiaomi does it right when it comes to not adding so much sharpness, where the Huawei is adding a little bit too much sharpness here and there. It might look a bit artificial when you pixel peep and compare them. But overall, I think that the Xiaomi 13 Ultra's main cameras, photos, are a bit better than on the Huawei P60 Pro. I don't like it too much. But when it comes to the ultra-wide angle, it's a clear win for the Huawei here. It's almost as wide as the Xiaomi 13 Ultra, but much sharper. And I think HDR is a bit better there as well. But when it comes to the zoom cameras, very interesting. We have definitely telemacro capabilities on the Huawei P60 Pro that looks so nice for macro shots. And also I think the portrait shots look a bit sharper and a little bit better here and there with the P60 Pro, especially when you utilize the 3.5 times zoom. You don't have to use the portrait shots all the time. But the Xiaomi has a bit more creative looks there that might beat here and there the Huawei looks there. But yeah, they don't have this telemacro capability anymore on the Xiaomi, which is quite of a bummer because I would like it to have it. Otherwise, I'm just happy with both. And the zoom, the P60 Pro is impressive that it's keeping up with the 5 times optical zoom of the Xiaomi, but the Xiaomi is beating it ultimately, especially when you go like beyond 5 times, 10 times and more. Then the Xiaomi is better than the Huawei there, even though the processing might be a bit more advanced on the Huawei. Also, you can see the nighttime photos, I think both doing a good job, but the P60 Pro is a bit better with processing, where the Xiaomi is better with just simply optics and their main sensor. Overall, the front-facing cameras, not forget about the front-facing cameras, it's just something that the Xiaomi is not very good at, and they have to improve a lot. Here the P60 Pro easily wins in video and in photo mode. So overall, when you calculate everything together, yes, the Xiaomi has a better main sensor, even like a further zoom range, but the P60 Pro with its telemacro capabilities, and it's still very good main sensor with variable aperture that you can use for variable things or various different things there, and better selfie cam are a tad better than as an overall camera package. The P60 Pro is winning against the Xiaomi 13 Ultra, but only by a very small margin, and it's very impressive what Xiaomi is doing so far. And yeah, no matter which one you choose here, it's my personal choice. You can write down in the comment section which one you liked better. And that's everything for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and until the next time, bye.